Good afternoon. Welcome to Columbia. I'm Larry Jackson, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, Core Curriculum, and Undergraduate Programs. I also teach both Literature, Humanities, and Contemporary Civilization in the core curriculum. I am delighted to welcome you today to this webinar on being a successful online learner. Now, I'd like to invite my fellow panelists to join me and introduce themselves. Hello, panelists, and welcome. If I could ask each of you to introduce yourselves, and why don't we start with Amanda?
Hello, everybody. I'm Amanda Gralto. I work in the Center for Student Advising. I am the Associate Director of Tutoring and Academic Support. So I run our tutoring program, our Academic Success Skills workshops, our Getting Things Done program, also our Peer Academic Skills Consultant program. We have 3 of them here with us today, so they'll talk about the program a little bit and share about themselves. Also, I've actually completed my master's degree completely online a number of years ago, but I have also experience being an online learner myself.
Great, thank you so much, Amanda. And Megan?
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan. I'm a rising junior in Columbia College, so class of 2022. I am studying political science, possibly adding in a minor, not sure yet. And in terms of my experience with online learning, I spent the last spring, at home studying. And I also have experience as an online tutor. So.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And Helen?
Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing well. My name is Helen. I'm a senior in Columbia College. I'm studying political science with a concentration in business management. And I guess in terms of my online learning experience, kind of like Megan, spent the back end of the semester learning online.
Great, thank you so much, Helen. And Peter?
Hi everyone, my name is Peter. Like Megan, I'm a rising junior, class of 2022. I'm in C's studying Earth and Environmental Engineering. And like everyone, I have as much experience in just one semester. I also tutored online a little bit, but I'm still pretty new to this online learning too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amanda, Megan, Helen, and Peter. Again, I want to thank all of you who are out there for joining us for today's webinar. And I want to welcome you all again to Columbia. We're very excited to start the academic year and have you join our community. When the COVID-19 pandemic reached New York City in March, Columbia rapidly transitioned to remote instruction for the remainder of the spring semester. With our usual practices and habits disrupted and our community spreading out across the globe, we worked together to ensure the best educational experience possible. We grappled with the challenges posed by having students and faculty in different time zones and using new technologies in an unfamiliar course modality. What we discovered in the process were new ways of exploring course content, discussing class topics, and perhaps most importantly, collaborating, conversing, and connecting with one another. Faculty and students used creative strategies to make online lectures and discussions effective and engaging, and class projects more imaginative. In the months since the spring 2020 semester drew to its conclusion, faculty have collectively reflected on their experiences with remote education, researched the best approaches to online learning, and refined their methods. Some have even applied the lessons of the spring semester to summer classes, where they have continued to gain valuable experience. As you prepare for the start of the 2020-21 academic year in just 6 weeks, maybe even a little less than that, your professors are busy preparing for a fall semester that will be unlike any other in the history of Columbia, with a mix of online, in-person, and hybrid classes. All classes, even those that will be held in person, will go online after Thanksgiving, and most will include online lectures, discussions, and activities well before then. One thing that has not changed, though, is our commitment to offering you the best educational experience possible. Our faculty will continue to bring great expertise to their teaching, whether it is in a classroom or over Zoom, and an abiding commitment to excellence in their work with you, our students. But you also have responsibilities as learners, both to yourselves and to one another. Since all classes will have some online components, one way to meet those responsibilities is to learn the strategies and etiquette that will make you successful online learners who contribute to the academic community that you will be joining in September. Today, you're going to hear from these 4 wonderful panelists, all of whom have knowledge of online learning, some of which they've talked about already. And more generally, they have a lot of expertise when it comes to the effective habits and behaviors that lead to academic success. Excuse me. They'll talk about their experiences and observations and offer suggestions for how you can get the most out of your fall semester. You can use the chat function to send us questions. A few of you have already, and we will be answering those questions later on. I'll be reading them throughout. We'll probably reserve some time at the end of the call. We're also at the very end of this webinar for the last 3 to 4 minutes going to post a slide that will include a list of resources that you can take advantage of at Columbia. And I think probably throughout the call, we will be talking a little bit about some of those resources. Above all, you should know that as you join the Columbia community, there is a large group of faculty, staff, and students who are here to support you. If you have any questions about online learning, please speak with your advising dean in the Center for Student Advising, and also feel free to reach out to me at any time. Again, Larry Jackson, lj2504@columbia.edu. I'll repeat that, lj2504@columbia.edu. Please feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or concerns as the academic year is beginning. So let's get started. A distinctive feature of learning at the college level is that it takes on many different forms. As students, you're going to take lectures, you're going to participate in seminars and discussions, labs and recitations. Each of these unique approaches to education has its benefits, each has some drawbacks. So I want to begin by talking a little bit about some of the benefits and challenges of online learning. And I want to turn first to the students who are on our panel and ask them to talk a little bit about the transition to online learning that they experienced back in March. So Megan, let's start with you. How was it different from your in-person classes, the switch to online learning?
Sure. I think the most jarring transition was the time that I now had finding myself at home. You don't realize how much time you spend walking to classes, walking to the dining hall, talking to friends, stopping outside. So I definitely had more time. One of the things that I did to sort of situate myself within the day is the night before, I would just sit with my planner. I actually have it right here with me, and I still do it now. I have brought that into summer where I'll sit and I'll like plan. It's kind of a lot, but by hour, like, okay, this is what I'm doing then, this is what I'm doing now. So it gives me a little bit more structure, and it helped me feel calm within my day, and not that I had just too much time. And another thing that I am now a big fan of is no pajama days. So I would always get up, do my hair, sometimes I'd even put makeup on, get dressed, like full outfits, dresses, nice pants, and I would even put shoes on sometimes, and I'd get ready to work just so I felt like I wasn't in bed in my pajamas. Even if I was in bed, I was dressed. So it just definitely changed my whole attitude, and I feel like I was awake and productive. So that's my biggest tip, is get dressed, like start your day, have breakfast, bring your coffee. So try to make it as normal as possible.
That's great. Thank you very much, Megan. Helen, could you talk a little bit about your experience with this transition from in-person instruction to online instruction back in March?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest problem for me initially was like motivation and attention. I think it's really easy to feel like motivated going to class when you're walking with friends and you're there anyway, but it's kind of hard when you're really close to the kitchen and you're feeling like, oh, maybe a snack yet. So I mean, I think like first Megan makes a really good point, like dress up and like dress like you're going to class. And I also think something that was really important for me was like finding a space that was just for like me academically, a space where like I could focus, and a space where I wouldn't be like interrupted. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Helen. And Peter, talk a little bit about your transition.
So going off of what Megan and Helen said, I had a very similar experience that in March, it was kind of a shock to just one day you go to class like normal, the next day you go online. And I faced those same kind of struggles with motivation and finding a routine. And I think that, like, from my experience, just give yourself some time, reevaluate like what it's like going to school, what it's like going to class, and give yourself like a week, 10 days, really settle in, find what works for you. And that once you find that, you can really begin the year like anew, and that online learning works pretty well once you know how to approach it, but just give yourself some time. I really struggled finding that and like rushing to try and do what I was doing before, even though I couldn't do it anymore.
That's great. Thank you so much, Peter. So Amanda, now having heard these responses from our student panelists, you talk to a lot of students, you have kind of a bird's eye view of this. Do these answers resonate with what you've heard from other students? Are there kind of more general themes or takeaways that you could sort of point us to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would definitely say that a lot of what Peter, Megan, and Helen said was a lot of what I heard from the students. I think one area that's especially important to pay attention to is time management when you're looking at the coming semester. So I do have to say, I also myself use a paper planner. So whatever that looks for you, whether it's a paper planner, yay, another one, or you're using Google Calendar or to-do lists or whatever it is, trying to create some sort of schedule for yourself, because there's just so much more free time and there's not as much, time constraints of what's going on, of really trying to think, okay, how am I going to plan my day? Kind of plan it like a work day, like, okay, maybe I'll start at 9 and I'll go to 5 and see how that works. That might also be more beneficial. Maybe you don't have to pull all-nighters and be up for a while in the library if you're able to say, okay, I'm going to try to work during the day and see how that goes. I'd also, say thinking about the space of where you're going to focus on school is especially important. If you are in a household with other people, coordinating that. If you're on campus, figuring out how am I going to, being my, my space, living here, but also working, what do I need to make that a productive space for myself? How am I going to make it, relaxing and enjoyable as well? If you're all in, one room most of the time, how can you kind of separate that as well? So thinking about those ideas too.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amanda. So yeah, time is definitely different in the online world than it is in the face-to-face world, the in-person world. Having that kind of space, a well-ordered, organized space that you can go to. Megan, I liked your point also about no pajamas. So, we want to be comfortable, of course, but it's important that we feel like there's some kind of separation between this learning space that we're in and, hanging out on the couch, watching Netflix. So having some kind of ritual or something that marks that sort of separation between, chill mode and study mode, I think is a really important thing. Along these lines, going back to this idea of time and how it's different, I hear a lot about Zoom fatigue. Is this something that you've experienced? I'm going to turn to the student panelists now. And if so, any tips for managing it? How do you get through that? Helen, let's start with you.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue is real. I think probably like the biggest thing for me is that like you can't really control how many hours a day that you're on Zoom. You have your schedule and your classes are when they are, but I think something I like to do is just, if I have like a 15-minute block between classes, like I'll go outside and I'll like walk and simulate walking to class, which sounds kind of stupid. Yeah, but I think it's like important to maximize the time that you have for yourself, like off screen, and use that to your advantage.
That's great. Walking, I'm a huge fan of walking. I'll just throw in, I had a baby 4 months ago. My wife and I had a baby. And so there have been lots of times in between my Zoom meetings, I have held my baby and just paced in the living room to try to get a little bit of a walk in when I couldn't go outside. So yes, even if it's just basically being in place, being in your room, being in your living room and just, your dorm room and just pacing a little bit just to get a little exercise and to stretch and to kind of take a little bit of a break. Peter, I think you had a pretty intense schedule in the spring semester. So I think you were grappling a lot with Zoom fatigue. Could you talk to us a little bit about what your experience was with that?
Yeah, definitely. So C's is known for having a lot of lectures, not all of them necessarily the most enthralling all the time. Sometimes ODE online isn't what you want to do. And so I would have 3 classes back to back in the morning, and I was behind in time. So I was waking up earlier than I used to, and then go to class 3 in a row. And so I would always kind of feel like really worn out after the first 2 classes. And that was one hard thing, but then I learned that really with Zoom, since everything is recorded, take a break. If your lecture is recorded and goes up a few hours later, some days I would just couldn't be there mentally for a class, and I would say, I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to make myself a sandwich and then read a book, do a crossword puzzle, just something not school, and then go back to it later, because it really helped relieve that stress of school. I have to be working all the time, when I knew that I could just take a break and take care of myself and then pick up later when I would be more prepared and more capable to tackle those problems.
That's great. So, and Peter, what was the time difference that you were dealing with?
I was lucky. It was only an hour, but
Okay.
But an 8:40 turning into a 7:40.
Yeah. That's rough. And that's another thing to be conscious of, for any of you who might be taking online or hybrid classes and not be on campus. Just keep that in mind as you are looking at your fall schedule. That, think about the times when you're going to be most productive and you're going to best be able to engage with your course material. But Peter, I think your suggestion is a really great one. And it's one of the unique possibilities of online learning, that suddenly there is this, to get technical about it, asynchronous element, which is simply to say that things might be recorded and you can watch them at any time. That introduces a lot of flexibility into the experience. Megan, could you talk a little bit about your experiences with Zoom fatigue and any coping strategies that you have?
Sure. Kind of a small thing that I've been doing is, when I was having a lecture or even a discussion section, I would handwrite my notes as opposed to, excuse me, typing them, just because then I was only looking at a screen for so many hours, and I would have the Zoom on one small part and then my notes on the other part. So I found that handwriting my notes allowed my eyes to take a little bit of a rest. I remembered how to write, and I wasn't typing all day. And I was able to have, my class large. I could see more people. So that was a small thing, but it really, really helped me, is to not be typing all day, just because then you're looking at your screen for hours and hours and hours. So intervals of paper screen is, I think, a little bit helpful.
That's great. And by the way, and Amanda, you probably know this much better than I know. There is research also that finds, just in general, taking notes by hand is more effective than typing notes. Is that right? So that you actually learn better by doing that. So it's not only a good strategy to utilize. By the way, this is going to be a big theme, spoiler alert here, that many of the good strategies for online learning are just good strategies in general. But this is one of those strategies that kind of works. So again, Amanda, kind of drawing on your expertise here and your conversations with lots of students, are there other strategies, other recommendations that you would make for self-care, for ways of minimizing that experience of Zoom fatigue, or just the toll that back-to-back online classes can take?
Yeah, I mean, I can't stress enough how important breaks are. I know Peter touched upon that a little bit, but just thinking about even small breaks. So if you're in a lecture or you're watching a recorded lecture, you can pause it and take a break. Go do a quick walk. Go, walk around your house or your apartment or wherever you're at, walk around the block, go get a snack. Take the little breaks between, especially if you're watching a lot within a day. I would also say, thinking about what extracurricular activities you're doing or things outside of class time, is try to limit the screen time in that sense too. So maybe instead of watching as much Netflix or scrolling through your phone, maybe having an actual phone call with somebody, so you're still communicating and you're connecting with others, but it's not FaceTime, or you're not on another Zoom with your friends or whatnot, or family. So thinking about having more kind of phone calls. I would also say, thinking about sleep is a huge component as a student in life, just in general. But in specific, when it comes to screen time, it can definitely affect your sleeping, the amount of time you're on a screen, looking at a screen. So, thinking about before you go to sleep, try to turn off all screens at least 30 minutes beforehand. So, try to turn that TV off of 30 minutes beforehand, put your phone down for a little bit, maybe read a book, do something else. Another thing also going to show is blue light glasses. They look a little weird if I had them in the recording, but grab a pair of blue light glasses. They're pretty cheap. You don't have to get fancy ones, but they definitely help. I've been using them regularly through my work day, and they've helped with my sleeping. They've helped, eliminate any of that stress or feeling that I'm like, oh, I'm getting a headache from being online. So that's another really great resource if you can grab a pair.
Thank you, Amanda. Amanda, you raised an interesting thought as well for me, which is we talked about the importance of separating work from relaxation through, some kind of ritual, like, changing out of pajamas or having a dedicated workspace, but it works in the other direction as well. There's a lot of research on sleep hygiene, for instance, and not bringing digital devices into bed, not bringing those into the space when you're sleeping. So you want to create that separation also so that you maintain a space to relax and just have, your downtime and your restorative time. And I'd also just make a plug for meditation, which does not have to be elaborate at all. Just a few minutes sitting in one place, as still as you can be, just focusing on your breath with your eyes closed or just looking at a point on the floor is a really good way of just finding yourself, getting rejuvenated and creating some separation between work and relaxation. So I now want to ask everyone to talk a little bit about some of the pleasant surprises of online learning. What happened that you didn't expect that you really liked about it? So Helen, could you kick us off and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one benefit I've heard from some of my friends, and I think also this is really applicable to freshman year, you're going to end up in a lot of big lecture classes, and sometimes that's super intimidating to participate in 200, 100 person lectures. So online, there's that ease of kind of anonymity in some ways. You can kind of, from the comfort of your own home, prepare what you want to say, unmute yourself, say it. Yeah, I think some people really take comfort in that. So definitely could be viewed as a plus.
Great, thank you very much. And Megan?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the opposite of having so much time, not being overwhelming, I definitely was able to come out of student mode more often, as opposed to on campus when you're walking to class, going to the dining hall, then you feel pulled to the library and guilty if you don't go. So you kind of feel like you're a student all the time. Being home, I was a little bit more able to read for fun, and I started working out and integrating sort of normal people outside of student world activities, because I wasn't stuck in the classroom all day. So I think if I used my time wisely, and it took me a while to sort of figure out how to use my free time, it feels a little bit more well-rounded, like a full human adult life, as opposed to just a student all the time, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And Peter, any sort of pleasant surprises, advantages, benefits that you found from the online experience?
Yeah, really echoing Helen and Megan. I think that online learning, really, you can make it your own. A lot of the time when you're on campus, you have to go to this class, you have to be here, 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 and your day kind of controls you. But online, you can really take control of your day. Like Megan said, maybe start working out, find a hobby that you like, play a board game with someone if you're at home. You can build in weird things that you would never do on campus and kind of make school your own, which I thought was kind of fun.
Great, thank you. So I want to switch gears a little bit here, and I want to now talk about some of the different strategies for online learning, things that all of you panelists would recommend to students. So let's begin by talking a bit about some of the digital tools that you've been using that have been helpful for your online experience, either things that your professors have introduced to the class, or some of the tools that you yourselves just might have been using that you didn't use previously. So Peter, let's go back to you. If you could start and tell us a little bit about some of the digital tools that were helpful as you were in class in the spring.
So coming from C's, our classes usually are big, and there's a tool that they build in that every professor pretty much uses called Piazza, which was really, really useful, especially when it went online, because it became like a study group that the whole class could use. You just shoot your question off to the professor. Either the professor answers it in a few minutes sometimes, or students will answer. And from there, you can really like get in contact with people. You can form a study group from there. You can make connections on Piazza because there's no pressure to meet someone. You're just there to see how to do your homework. And kind of along those lines, it was also really useful for asking questions, because it feels like a lot of the time when you're in lecture, if you're lost, you're the only one that's lost. But then when you're online, you can type a question and you see someone like, how many people open the question, how many people react with it. And you see, oh, maybe I'm not the only one that's lost. And that it really gives you kind of a sense of online community, that you're all working at it together. And that's my recommendation or tip, is really just ask questions online as much as you can. It's really helpful.
And going back to my earlier point that often the best practices online or the best practices in person, that is true in all of your classes, in person, online, hybrid, whatever. Ask questions if you have them, because exactly as you were saying, Peter, often if you don't understand something or you're confused about something, lots of other people in the room are as well. And I can tell you, whenever I teach, I am so grateful when students ask questions, because it's often a point that I've overlooked, I've glossed over, I just didn't think to clarify. So it's incredibly helpful. Your professors will be grateful to you. So yes, ask those questions, but especially online, you'll have these tools for doing so. Megan, could you talk a little bit about some of the tools and functions and other things of online learning that you found were particularly useful?
I think some of the positives specifically with Zoom that I've loved the most is I love breakout rooms so much. Like when the professor says it's breakout room time, I'm like, yeah, like, because I like talking to people. And I feel like in the larger group settings, even when it's like 10 or so, you don't kind of want to speak up because you don't want to interrupt someone. It's like really awkward when that happens. So breakout rooms are really, really nice. And particularly when we like transitioned into online, you kind of knew people already. And if you're in hybrid classes, you'll know people in person. So you kind of hope that that person is in your breakout room. So they're fun. And it's a nice way to get a little bit more like intimate connections with your classmates, particularly if it's like a larger lecture or discussion section. I had one, I know that freshmen will be taking Lit Hum, and if any sophomores like CC. So those are really discussion based. So you do get to have discussion over Zoom because of breakout rooms. And another thing that I really like is screen sharing. So when professors will screen share, but I love when students screen share. So when we present to the class to be able to share, I took a history course where we had to like pull up random pictures of historical artifacts and like talk about it to the class. So it's definitely interactive, and it helps like balance out the classroom setting where you're constantly moving from breakout rooms to screen sharing to the professor lecturing. So I found that it's not just an hour of the professor speaking on Zoom. There's a lot of dynamics in the classroom. So I wouldn't be stressed about kind of plateauing classes.
Great. Helen, anything to add? Particular tools that you found really useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think just echoing Peter and Megan, like Piazza, breakout rooms, screen sharing, those are probably my favorites. But I think I also saw one thing like done that I thought was pretty cool. I was on like a Zoom session and someone used like an annotation function. So they shared their screen and you could like kind of type in answers and it would like pop up, and they were like all anonymous, and it was just actually like really, really cool. So yeah, I think there definitely are so many functionalities that people can play around with, and I think professors are kind of, starting to come up with new ones and figure them out. But yeah, I think there are like so many cool things that I've seen done that have been like really, really helpful.
Yeah, and this is to that point. This is a lot of what professors have been doing over the last few months. And these conversations started back in March, where professors would get together. Some of them had lots of knowledge of various technologies and tools that could be useful in the classroom. Others didn't. And they just started trading ideas and discussing ideas and introducing a lot of these elements into their classes. And more of that has been happening over the summer as well. So I would expect some of this, but it also sounds like, and Amanda, maybe I'll kind of ask you to add any other tools that you've been hearing about or that you've been observing that you know of, but also in particular if there's anything that you think students can kind of do on their own as well, not just waiting on the professor to sort of set up certain things in the class. Are there some things that students can just kind of collectively do that would be helpful online?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Peter, Megan, and Helen spoke about a lot of the different resources that professors are using in the classroom, in the Zoom classroom. I think another quick one is there's, a poll feature. So that's another unique engagement activity that happens in Zoom. So I think there are a lot of benefits to, having these classes through Zoom. There's a lot of unique engagement opportunities. I think, something, and we'll continue to talk about this, but the piece of getting connected with the peers in your classes is a huge component that I think something you want to figure out how that can be put in place. So there are, some ways to do that may be built out through your breakout rooms or through Piazza or whatnot. We also have a study group interest forum resource on our website where you can be connected to other students. So I think that's a really good component to add to not only the classroom component, but also connecting with your peers and creating study groups and working with them through, the material as well.
That's great. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, and I'll just make a plug for just even a basic Google Doc that, this is something I used to do with my students before. I used to try to come up with some collaborative projects where and sometimes it would just be a study guide that we would put together. We'd get together for a session. Several of us would have laptops. We would discuss whatever the topic was, whatever we wanted to include in the study guide or in this collaborative project. And we would just simultaneously be working on it together. And, it's one of those things that now I'm going to be doing a lot more of that with students, because I think it's a great way for students to collaborate and to work together on a project. And again, that's something that you can do on your own. You just find some other people in the class who want to put together a study guide or want to do something collaboratively. And you can do that on a Google Doc and just share it with people. We're coming to my favorite moment in this, which is the discussion of etiquette, Zoom etiquette. And I love this discussion because everybody has a great story about something that someone did in a class or a meeting that was just kind of a jaw-dropping breach of etiquette. So let's talk about some etiquette for Zoom, etiquette for online classes. Peter, could you start us off? What would be some things that you recommend people do to be polite? Peter, are you there? Did we lose you?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay.
The full Zoom experience.
You were demonstrating for us. You don't just leave. Right? Rule number one.
Yes, exactly. I believe we're talking about Zoom etiquette before I cut out. Okay. Yes. If your internet connection is stable, that you're already covered number one. 1A though, definitely go to your Zoom settings and make it so that you mute yourself as soon as you come in. I've been in many a class where someone forgets that they have their mic on right when they come in and they're talking in the middle of a conversation with someone. I guess another Zoom etiquette thing, one time in a class, someone was eating their breakfast walking down the hall in the dorm room, and try and be in one place during Zoom. That I think helps a lot of people. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but.
No worries at all. Thank you so much, Peter. We're getting the authentic experience here. Megan, Any etiquette recommendations?
So definitely echoing what Peter had said is make sure that your mic is off, even if it's in like a small setting, not even just for like the background sounds of your home, if it's your parents or your friends. I live in Manhattan right now and on campus, and it's loud in Manhattan with cars and ambulances and everything going on. So you forget like the outdoor, people are dogs barking. So, just mute it for the sake of it can get really distracting. So that's one. And another thing is not saying it happened to me or anything, but Zoom chats are really stressful because they always will, like you think you're going to send it to one person and you either send it to everyone or, not saying it's happened to me, the professor. Even when it's something that's like tangentially related to the class or entirely not related, it's really, really mortifying when you send a private chat to the class or the professor. So my recommendation is steer entirely clear of the Zoom chat unless you're totally sending a message to the entire class a question. But if it's a private conversation, don't do that during class. But if you must, send a text because the Zoom chat is a problem waiting to happen.
Yeah, I would amend that slightly just by saying like the group, chatting everybody can be great. If you have a question or a comment or something, as long as the professor is okay with that, that can be a really powerful function to use. Peter, I think at one point you mentioned to me, even just sometimes sending like a private message that just says good question to another student. But yeah, to your point, Megan, don't send private chats like, oh, Professor Jackson, he talks a lot, doesn't he? Because Professor Jackson's not going to be happy if he sees that, he reads that. Helen, any etiquette tips for us?
Yeah, I mean, the muting is huge. I had someone who would come in kind of like a little bit late, pretty much every class, and his mom would like repeatedly come in and be like, "What are you up to, honey?" And he was like, "I'm in class, Mom," like things like that. And then the professor would be like, "Hello, who's speaking? I'm sorry, did someone have a question?" And it would like go on repeatedly for like a good 20-30 minutes. So try not to be that person. It's okay if it happens a couple times, but yeah, I mean, ideally probably a situation to avoid. And I also think in terms of like video, some classes, especially the bigger ones, they don't care if you have your video off, but especially for like Lit Hum or CC, they probably want you to have your video on. So I guess in terms of like video, not video, make sure to like straighten that out with your professor.
Yeah, excellent point. And I think, ideally try to have your video on. You can have a virtual background. That's always good. If you want to have that. And of course, sometimes if you don't have great bandwidth, you might have to turn off the camera for a little while, but trying to be as present as possible, I think, is really important. Amanda, anything else that you would add to other things that you've observed or have heard from other students?
Yeah, so just to add to Megan's point about the Zoom chat, so also keep in mind another reason not to send private chats is whoever's the host of the Zoom meeting can see the whole chat no matter what. So again, just avoid the private chats between other classmates unless it's class related and you are okay with the professor seeing it. I would also say, we've talked a little bit about trying not to do work in bed. It's one thing if you're sitting on your bed and you can't tell that you're in bed, but if you are laying in bed, the pillow's in the background, you got blankets up, not probably the best. I have seen it. It's very uncomfortable, very awkward. So try not to be basically sleeping while you're in class. And also being aware, if you do wear glasses, that if you're looking at other things on the screen, sometimes you could see the reflection in the glasses. So you can see like if you're on Instagram. So just, trying to be aware of what else you're doing while you're in class, because people may be able to see the reflection.
Even if you don't wear glasses, if you turn on your phone, for instance, the glow of your phone is obvious. So yeah, that's another important one. So I'm going to ask, over the next 6 or 7 minutes, I'm going to ask 3 more questions to all of our panelists. I want to ask about maintaining connections first the connections with professors, then connections with one another, with students, then just any final last thoughts, tips, words of wisdom that you panelists can leave us with. And then I have been monitoring the questions that have been coming in, and I have a few questions from our webinar participants that I want to ask the panelists as well. So those will be your questions out there in webinar land. So approaching professors, keeping a connection with professors. If I could first ask each of the students, let's start with Helen this time. How did you reach out to professors? How did you interact with them once you were online?
Yeah, I mean, in so many ways, I feel like for me, and this might be the opposite for other people, but for me, keeping in contact with professors actually ended up being easier once I was online. I'm an athlete at Columbia, and a lot of times I couldn't really make office hours, so I'd have to like go out of my way to schedule meetings with professors. But yeah, I mean, now that everything's kind of more freeform, I've been on like on phone calls with professors, Zoom calls. I just have found them really, really accessible, and in some ways really humanized. So yeah, it's actually been really good.
It's ironic, right? So Megan, did that resonate with you? Has your experience with professors changed at all?
Definitely, and I entirely agree with what Helen said. They're definitely more accessible now and more laid back in a way. It's still obviously professional to your professor, but like when you walk into an office hour at like the top of the top of a building with their bookcases and all of their degrees on display, you get a little bit nervous. But when you Zoom call them, they're in their home. I've had multiple professors where either a child or an animal will walk into the screen, so you just feel a little bit more comfortable, like, you're a person too. I forgot for a minute. So it's definitely more natural and comfortable. And I've also found that like when you're on Zoom, the professor also has a little bit more time because they don't have anywhere to be either. So you talk about your assignment, but then you also talk about how class is going and what you're passionate about. So I've had some really, really wonderful conversations with professors just over Zoom because we had more time to just chat and get to know each other. So that has been really, really nice.
That's great. Peter?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Megan and Helen said, especially Megan about how going to your leading professor on Zoom, it's a lot easier. It's scary walking into someone, you walk past their lab, you see all the work they're doing. But if you call them and they have a virtual background on, you think, oh, maybe their house is messy like mine. And that you just have a lot more personability on Zoom. And personally, I took much more advantage of contact with professors once it went on Zoom, just because it was a lot less stressful.
Great, thank you. Amanda, what advice would you give to students about reaching out to their professors, approaching their professors for office hours or help in a class, questions that they have, or even just getting to know the professor?
Yeah, I mean, I would say try to make those connections early. So, going to their office hours or whatever it looks like at the beginning of the semester, introduce yourself. I think everything that's going on, we're all sharing the same type of experience in some sense. So it does make it like, so where are you located? Where are you at? How are things going? Make those connections, establish those connections, and, continuously meet with the professor. As you're going on through the semester, either bringing one question or a topic, so at least you have some direction of what you want to talk to the professor about. But then because, like Megan said, there's more time, you can talk about other things and you're establishing the relationship with the professor. You may talk about, okay, their dog did show up in the background. What kind of dog do you have? What's your dog's name? So making those connections is going to be, beneficial throughout the semester and, your future time at Columbia and beyond.
Great, thank you. And how about one another? I mean, how did all of you find, now you had the experience of already being in in-person classes that shifted online. How did you maintain those relationships with your fellow students though? Or how did you even create new relationships and get to know people maybe you didn't know as well before in the class? So Megan?
Mm-hmm. So definitely I found even before we had to go online, I always like to pick classes where there's like one person, like one friend is in it. So it's always like, what are you registering for? I want to take this class with me. It just makes it so much nicer when you have someone that you know in your class. And that did obviously take time. When I was a freshman, I didn't know anybody. So another thing that you could do is if it's a small class, start to get to know people. You should feel comfortable like sending an email to everybody and just asking like, hey, I would love to do this, or can I have someone's number? And just like feel free to like reach out, or even in the chat for the whole class at the end of class, you can like put your phone number in and say like, hey, if anyone wants to reach out, I'd love to talk more about class, or even just to get to know people. Feel comfortable putting your number in the chat or putting your uni in the chat. At the end of class, the professor won't mind it ever, and or like for the most part, because you're getting to know your classmates. So the biggest advice is just put yourself out there. Everyone wants to make friends, especially freshmen, like online. And once you do start to like develop relationships, I would recommend, bringing a friend into the class that you want to take in the spring, or, going forward. It makes it more fun.
Great. Peter, I think you mentioned that you were in a lot of lectures. So what were some of the things that you did to reach out to students and maintain relationships with students in those classes?
Yeah, so in big lectures, I used the private chat sparingly, but like, for example, I had a project and it was a group project, and my group was working on one thing. Another group presented in class about their thing. And like, I just shot them a message saying, oh, I think your project is really interesting. Would you be interested in collaborating and working? And then from there, like, we could put our two groups together. We could all work together. And that I think if you did that in person, it would be really strange to walk up to someone after they present in class and ask them, oh, let's work together. But on Zoom or online, it's much more natural. And just to kind of put yourself out there and say like, oh, this is good, and I think I'd like to work with you. And people seem to be responsive.
Great, thank you. Helen, I think you had a slightly different approach with maintaining some contacts with students. You were kind of doing more outside of class, right? To maintain that sense of community?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for me, I would like rarely find myself walking alone between classes, and to kind of simulate having that camaraderie, that companionship, I would probably like call friends to FaceTime, or just like call on the phone for like the 15 minutes in between class. But I also do want to echo Peter's sentiment about the private chat, because I've had some classes where like I was in a constitutional history class that was like really cool, and the amount of niche knowledge that people have on specific cases, and they would just send it through and they're like, hey, if anyone finds this interesting. And that was like a really, really cool aspect that we didn't have in person.
That's great. Thank you. Amanda, any other thoughts, tips on maintaining community among students?
Yeah, I mean, I think another piece of connecting with others, apologize for if you hear the phone in the background. Another piece of connecting with others is that you can, use them as accountability partners.
Great. We can come back to that also when the phone stops ringing if there's more you want to add. Let's take 2 more minutes. I would just kind of lightning round for all of the panelists. Any final thoughts, last parting words of wisdom before we turn to some of the questions we've been getting from folks on the webinar? Tips, resources, general advice, what would you say? Peter, let's start with you.
So my number one lightning round tip would be give yourself more time to do homework. Things will take longer than you expect online because it's hard to be present for so long.
Great. Helen?
I would say number 1, find a space that's just yours for work. And I think number 2, I would just kind of approach this as like an opportunity to re-engage with the reasons that you came to Columbia in the first place, because I think that anyone can go to college and kind of have a good time because it's new, you're with your friends, but I guess like really take this time to re-engage. Are you passionate about what you're studying? Do you like the fact that you're here? Kind of like that. And I think you're going to be like excited about what you get out of it and what you find.
Wonderful, thank you. And Megan, any parting words of wisdom?
One thing is just like, when online classes start, you kind of want to be like, oh, I wish I was in person. Oh, I wish it wasn't like this. But I think the biggest takeaway is this is just our reality. So sort of accept that and do the best that you possibly can with the situation that it is, and like make the most of it, make connections, connect with your professors. and try not to think about like, oh, what if it wasn't like this, you know?
That's great. Thank you, Megan. And Amanda, any last words of advice or tips? And I know we have some resources that we'll be posting at the end of this webinar. So stay tuned for that. We'll leave that up for a few minutes, but there's a list of resources that you produced, Amanda, with a link to a website. So, but anything else you'd add now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think what's unique is that now you have the heads up that things are going to be online, so you have a little bit more of the preparation. You can get into the mindset of, okay, this is what the semester is going to look like. And another piece I would say is utilize all of the resources that are available to you. Every resource that Columbia has an online component for it, so you will be able to access anything that you need to and take advantage of those. So one that I mentioned before is the Peer Academic Skills Consultant. So Megan, Helen, and Peter are 3 of our 4 consultants. You can meet with them virtually. You can have one-on-one appointments with them and talk about some of these other strategies. How do you, I need assistance with note taking. I've never taken handwritten notes. I usually type notes. How can I make that more effective? Or how can I create a study schedule? And they can work with you one-on-one, and they have experienced this as well. So they're, another, resource I would definitely recommend.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amanda. So I want to turn to a couple of the questions that we've been getting from folks out there in the webinar. A lot of those questions had to do with time. I'll say more about that in a moment, but really good question that came to us concerned just kind of the structure and rhythm of an online class. What's a typical online class like? And I think that the general answer to this is the frustrating answer of it depends. It's going to depend on whether it's a large lecture, whether it's a small seminar. It's going to depend on who the professor is and what they want to do in the class. But I want to ask our student panelists. I throw this out to Helen, Megan, Peter, whichever of you wants to answer it. If you could maybe walk us through one of your classes from the spring once it went online. What was it like? How much of it was, Peter, you already talked a little bit about having these recorded lectures that you could watch at any time, but what was the seminar like? How was it different from an in-person seminar? What was the structure of the class?
So I could speak on seminars. I've taken some of that, particularly like CC and LitHum, that a lot of the freshmen are going to be taking. Is what my professor would do for CC would, about 5-10 minutes in the beginning of class would just kind of go over the text, the author, give some context. So it was lecture for the first 10 minutes. And then it was like kind of in a normal structure, pose a question to the class, and then people would unmute themselves or raise their hand using the participant button. And then someone would speak, and then someone else would raise their hand. And then we'd kind of just facilitate a conversation that way with just virtual hand raising. And then sometimes, midway through the class, the professor would do breakout rooms where it would be like a group has a certain question, another group has a certain question. And then, that's 15 minutes with your group. You'd come back and then you discuss your question. So it was pretty dynamic in terms of, it wasn't just the professor speaking. It wasn't just 2 hours of Zoom discussion. It was a lot of moving around, breakout rooms, talking about what other people have said, answering questions. So seminars, I found them to be pretty dynamic and still engaging in terms of conversation.
That's great. And I think that's pretty typical. I think you'll find in seminars, especially now that it's online, there will be some kind of general context that the professor might provide at the beginning, breakout rooms, general discussion among everybody. A lot of professors are using more recorded content, asynchronous materials. I know professors who have been recording brief lectures. So along the lines of what Peter was describing earlier, you could watch those lectures at any time, and then they are devoting the actual class time to more discussion about what was introduced in those lectures. Anything else, Peter, Helen, that you experienced that would kind of help elucidate what the overall structure or rhythm of an online class might be like for students?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like Megan pretty much covered it. Like a professor will kind of be like, hey, how's everyone doing, etc. Kind of maybe provide a couple questions, and then I think breakout rooms are pretty heavily utilized. And then we come back for kind of a general discussion.
And from my perspective, in a lot of the big lectures, like a chemistry, a physics, a calculus, really class goes on just as it would like in person. The professor uses like a whiteboard and they write out formulas and they do problems, and it transitions really nicely to Zoom. And so it's not that different from going to lecture in person necessarily.
Great, thank you so much, Peter. A couple of other questions just had to do with assignments, the types of assignments that students get. You know, typically the entire first year class takes a uniform exam for literature humanities. That is not going to be happening. It didn't happen in the spring, and it's not going to happen at least in the fall semester. That exam will be replaced probably by papers. Some instructors are very interested in doing more creative projects. We're actually going to be posting some of those creative projects that came out of the spring semester. So look out for those. I think we're going to be promoting some of those on Instagram and have those up on our website as well. So I think you'll see some classes will continue to administer exams. Other professors are going to move in different directions and replace exams with other kinds of assignments like papers. Time schedule, that was a really big question. Let me tell you what I know about that. So all departments have been working on revising their schedules for the fall semester. As all of you out there know, we are now moving to a 3-semester model for the 2020-21 academic year. So that was part of some of the rescheduling that was taking place, but we did ask departments also to bear in mind that there would be students who were taking classes remotely, who would be in other time zones. And so we have been trying to spread classes out over the course of the day as well to accommodate those students. In the core, which I can speak to in particular, because I'm responsible for scheduling all of those classes, I can tell you that this has been a big consideration for us. There are going to be opportunities for all of you. You will be, if you're a first-year Columbia College student, you are going to be placed into a literature humanities section and also a section of Frontiers of Science or University Writing. You will have opportunities to switch sections, though, if that section does not work for you. If you need to be in a section at another time for any reason, but especially if you need to be in a section at another time because you're in a different time zone, or if you have ended up in an in-person section and you need to be in an online section. So you'll have opportunities to make those changes. You can talk to your advising dean. You can also reach out to us in the Center for the Core Curriculum. You can send an email to core-curriculum@columbia.edu, or you can email me directly. Again, LJ2504. I'm an accessible guy, so please feel free to use that email address often, early and often. I think that for the most part, that covered things. Oh, there was a question about recording as well. Some professors do record the classes, others don't. Some professors think that it's more important for students to be able to have a more freewheeling conversation, and they think that the recording kind of stifles that possibility. So you will see if a class is being recorded, you'll see the little red circle at the top and it will say recording. But you can also talk to your professor about that and ask if they plan to record. If you're uncomfortable with recording, talk to your professor about that as well. I think that's about everything that we have. Amanda, anything else that you would add? Anything that I've missed?
No, I think we've covered a lot of it. I think we're good.
Okay, terrific. So thank you all so much. Please stick around for a couple more minutes. There's a slide which is about to go up, the slide I have promised you all, which will list resources that are available to you for online learning. There is a link to a website which I think goes into some real depth about online learning. And again, talk to your advising dean, reach out to me, LJ2504, if there's anything else, if you have questions or concerns as you go into this year. Thank you again for being with us on this webinar. Thank you to my wonderful co-panelists, and welcome to Columbia to all of you who are out there. I look forward to meeting all of you. Take care. Thank you.
So I'll just quickly go through these resources so you have a better idea of what they are. So first off, the Center for Student Advising offers free tutoring for students. Most of those classes are some of the intro classes, physics, Calc 1 through 3, Chem, Gen Chem, Orgo, Bio, Econ, Python, Java, Peter's actually also one of our tutors. Then we have the peer academic skills consultants, which I talked a little bit about. So you can also have, individual appointments with any of our consultants. We have the Getting Things Done program, which is a weekly group meeting held by usually CSA, Center for Student advising deans, and staff. And in those weekly meetings, you have, it's a small group setting with maybe 8 other of your peers. And each week we talk about a different academic skill. We talk about time management, battling procrastination, wellness, goal setting. So it's a nice group that you can, have a connection, a community with, and talk about some of those skills throughout the semester. We also have workshops throughout the semester, so we will be continuing our workshops. A lot of those workshops our consultants help us with as well. And they will be recorded, so you can attend them live or you can get the recording after the fact. We have the study group interest form, which I talked a little bit about, which can connect you to other people in your class. There are various help rooms on campus that you can, they have virtual help rooms that you can pop into and ask one question. You can ask a ton of questions. There's help rooms for chemistry, computer science, math, physics, and stats, as well as the writing center. So you can have virtual meetings with a writing consultant to help you with any of your writing projects. If you go to that link right there through the CSA, our academic resources page talks more in detail about all of these resources, how to access them, and how to sign up. I will also offer my uni is AG 3968. So if you have any questions about these, you can definitely reach out to me as well. And thank you all for being here, and good luck for your first semester.